Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out the radio version of the show every Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on WDJY 99.1 in Atlanta. We also air on a podcasting network in Los Angeles called the 405 Media. There's a TV version of the show that airs on KMVT 15 in Silicon Valley at 8 p.m. Pacific on Tuesday nights. Both versions of the show air in other states. For these show times, plus past episodes, please visit the show's website at buildingthefutureshow.com. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com. Join me at the 10th Annual Media Excellence Awards on January 18th in Beverly Hills, California. The attendees and I will be celebrating innovation and leadership in technology and entertainment. There are 20 award categories with 1,000 nominees. These awards honor those who are creating groundbreaking technology to better our lives and celebrate the hard work, determination, and brilliance in the leadership within the companies which create the new world we live in today. I will be recording nominees and winners at the awards. For tickets and more information, go to MediaXAwards.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Jim Cannella. He's the Senior Director, Executive Producer, and Digital Media at the Recording Academy, which produces the Grammys. Jim, welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you?
I'm very well. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I think kind of what you're doing and kind of your thoughts on where the industry is actually really fascinating to me. But maybe before we kind of get into all that, let's start off and get to know you a little bit better, and maybe start off with where you grew up.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in Chicago and in St. Louis, and I typically tell people it's the reason I may be mildly bipolar in that Chicago gave me a love of urban city life and
Sure.
independence, and St. Louis was the polar opposite of that, although a great place to go to high school and to experience a more suburban lifestyle. So the two sides really, I think, gave me two different points of view when it came to kind of approaching people and the various inputs in life that I think are important to consider. I think it actually makes me a better marketer too, as I started to apply it in my career.
Sure. So you went to university. What did you end up taking in university, and why did you decide to take it?
Yeah, I started taking econ classes and thinking that I was going to go into finance or something in the kind of traditional business world. Found that it was a little dry for my taste, and I also had since high school a very strong passion for music, and started playing music in college and really just going deeper and deeper into it. So I switched and began to follow marketing as a discipline.
Okay.
And also while doing that, I took another left turn and studied jazz for a year and a half as well. And I couldn't figure out how to bridge those two worlds. I really was passionate about music. I wanted to play. I wanted to be a performer.
What instrument did you play, just out of curiosity? Sorry to interrupt.
I played guitar, but
Okay.
When you study jazz, and that was my primary instrument, but when you study jazz, you have to also learn the piano, which is something I didn't at the college level. I didn't do growing up. And it's very steeped in theory and technique. And I came from a passionate, and this is the Chicago and St. Louis and the Mississippi River coming into play here.
Sure.
I was very passionate about the blues, and so I would be in a recital or I would be in a class about traditional jazz, and I would bend a note and get a stern look or a rap on the fingers with a ruler, and decided that maybe whereas I appreciated and loved the mathematics behind music theory, and it didn't fit necessarily my desire to paint outside the lines a little bit, and again, I had these aspirations to be in the business world as well. So as I'm starting to look at summer internships, I knew that the big promoter in town, this is in St. Louis,
Okay.
might need somebody like me, an enterprising young man who would work for free, of course, which helps, and just went after them and over and over and over applied and pleaded and tried to find any way in, and finally did get an internship with them 2.5 months into the internship. They asked if I wanted to come on as an hourly employee.
That's awesome.
I jumped at the chance, switched to night school, and that began my career in the music business. And it seemed like the perfect way to marry my passion with what I thought I could apply in terms of a business mind, and to develop both at the same time.
Sure. That's great. So walk me through kind of the rest of your kind of career up until the Recording Academy.
Well, I started really there. The company was Contemporary Productions. This is still the waning days of independent concert promoters.
Right.
And so, the way the system worked back in the early and mid 90s was every city had a independent promoter who was very entrepreneurial. They usually started by putting their own money up, or found a few investors, and they would take chances, take risk on bringing national acts, local acts and national acts, to audiences, rent venues, promote shows, marketing, promotion, business terms with the ticketing companies, all of these things wrapped up in these one-day events. There's one-evening events that would happen. And over time, and as they grew and became more successful, they would either grow to take over regions, or be the predominant promoter in a region, which this company Contemporary did in the Midwest. And also, they had more resources and more capital, so they could actually build some of their own venues. And this is where what we call the sheds started to come into place. The outdoor amphitheaters that had the first half of the building was reserved seats. The back half was a lawn, and these then popped up all over the country. And then you'd have clubs and theaters, and so you would do all size shows, and you would kind of represent your region or your city. And that was fascinating to me. Not only did I get to see and participate and meet and be part of putting these together, but also understand how that risk could then be applied or amortized over a full year of shows and ups and downs, and hopefully come out ahead there. And it taught me a couple lessons, which I certainly, and we'll probably talk about later, but I applied to the rest of my career. These businesses also would then start to diversify a little bit and start producing private events, whether it be for wealthy local individuals who wanted to put on a big charity event, or corporate partners who wanted to bring in their sales staff. They wanted to do an annual event or some sort of a big launch event. In St. Louis, we happen to have a lot of major companies: Anheuser-Busch,
right.
McDonnell Douglas, Ralston Purina. The list would go on and on. And I spent half of my time there as a production manager and a promoter rep, which meant that for the things we would do in traditional venues, I would be the guy that was the first one there, make sure that the crew got in, the stage got built. We had contracted all the different vendors you need to contract properly, make sure the artist is taken care of, show plays off, and you make sure that the dollars are tracked. Or the other part of the job was, as we would have these one-off events, special events that would happen on a large scale, we would, as a team, devise what the kind of a launch event would be, what the spectacle would be, and then do that on behalf of a corporate partner. So we opened up malls all over the country. We would do New Year's Eve events. We would do the annual 4th of July celebrations. So it was a really fun way to spend your 20s,
Sure, I
and
can
get to
imagine.
know all different sides of the business, and keep an eye at the same time on the business. And you could kind of see who was getting ahead, who wasn't, how some folks would get stuck in certain roles or positions, and you would see, maybe how their career track might go. And as you imagine yourself taking one of those roads, I decided early on that I wanted to be a master of many trades, and I wanted to know all different sides and all different angles of the business to give myself the flexibility. I didn't want to find myself as a 60-year-old who had the time of his life, but spent his entire life on the road, and never was able to establish some roots or establish himself in the upper ranks of an organization. Even though I really loved on the ground, getting your hands dirty, or being right there with the stagehands and with the guitar techs as we prepare to shine the flashlight up the stairs and have somebody get on stage.
That's amazing, man. I can't even imagine that. That must have been just like an absolute blast. But I understand how you could kind of just want to just settle down and kind of go to the same place maybe every day and not be on the road. I totally understand that, but I can't even imagine the stories you have, and I wish we could cover some of those. But I'm kind of curious then to know, how did you kind of get involved and start working with the Recording Academy?
Well, as that business was maturing, and we getting into the late 90s, there started to become consolidation.
Okay.
And so one company in particular rolled up. The company that I worked for, Pace Concerts out of Houston, Bill Graham Presents out of San Francisco, a couple of companies, and that was a gentleman by the name of Robert Sillerman, and he created SFX Entertainment. That roll-up of these individual promoters continued over time, and whereas I really enjoy the entrepreneurial feel of being kind of masters of your region, and I started to see the corporate consolidation, and I ran from it. I didn't like it. I could see where things were going. And it's funny, but as I tell you the rest of the story of my career, I chased that consolidation around for the next 20 to 25 years. So as that was happening, an upstart, a small boutique tour promoter called Concerts West was popping up in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And we had talked to them a couple of times about doing some projects. The big project ultimately did not happen. And I asked the CEO, a gentleman by the name of John Meglin, if he would hire me. He said yes, and I was the first employee there. Moved to Los Angeles, thought, okay, you made it to the big leagues in Los Angeles in the music business. And we literally worked out of a garage for a few months, then into I think we did 3 or 4 office moves as we continued to grow. And we're doing major projects. We're doing the Eagles. We're doing Mariah Carey. We're doing Reunited Bad Company. We're doing David Lee Roth. We're doing Christmas tours. And these are at the arena level. But This is a small upstart that's growing. We ultimately wound up being part of the Celine Dion Las Vegas project.
Oh, very cool.
Bringing that to creation, and the Coachella Festival, which had just started 1 year and had some financial difficulties. We came in with an investment there. Long story short is that ultimately got the attention of Philip Anschutz, who purchased Concerts West, rolled it into what is now known as AEG Live, which is the second biggest concert promoter in the world. The biggest concert promoter in the world was the result 5 years later of the consolidation I spoke of earlier, which became Live Nation.
Sure.
So again, through consolidation, through acquisition, I find myself in these in these companies, and ultimately decided that again wanted to go something a little bit more organic, and I jumped ship and went over to House of Blues,
Sure.
and was doing corporate partnerships, building tours at House of Blues, and ultimately got involved in technology. At House of Blues, I found myself immersed in mobile technology. We were at the forefront at the time of doing streaming of concerts well before there was a real business and legal right to do so. So before the first .com bubble burst, all of the House of Blues venues were actually streaming many of their shows, but this is before broadband penetration in the home. So you got a dial-up modem, and you're trying to stream a show on stage or download it later. Approvals and clearances and releases were hopefully in a folder someplace, but wasn't always first priority.
Those were on the House of Blues website, wasn't it?
Those were on the House of Blues website.
Yeah, that's wild, because I remember watching some of those like growing up. That's crazy. That's cool. And I remember because the province I live up in Canada actually got like cable high-speed internet like very kind of early on, and going from that like 56K modem to like cable internet was like crazy. So I remember that. Like that was around the time you guys were doing. That's wild. Okay, but keep going. Sorry. So as we are doing so, we also have a second part of the business. House of Blues was the recognizable name in those clubs, but those amphitheaters that I had mentioned, we had a network of those around the country as well that came from an acquisition of Universal Concerts. Right. So we had in Atlanta and in Denver and in a bunch of other markets the outdoor amphitheaters as well. And so I straddled the fence between the two, doing work in marketing and creating partnerships for the clubs as well as for the amphitheater side, and then starting to build from my Concerts West days a proper touring division that could, with the help of our lead talent booker, figure out a way so that you're not just with one tour, we're not just programming our 8, 10, 12 club House of Blues venues, but we're also hitting the other markets along the way on the route, and either partnering with the locals or the independents that were left to create a tour that we could financially participate in on a national basis. The .com bubble burst, the IPO that House of Blues had at the ready, which was based on the streaming strategy, dried up, and we still wanted to continue on with the touring business. And the powers that be said, "Well, you've got some experience working with sponsors on the amphitheater side of things. If we want the touring to continue to grow and to do interesting projects, we're going to have to figure out a way to attach sponsors to them so that they make financial sense." Sure. And I found myself then becoming a corporate partnership person and a sponsorship person that had all this past experience in how shows work and how tours work, and now how sponsorship works, and tried to put those things together. One of the towards the end of that run, one of the great sponsorships that we had was with Motorola, who at the time was on fire with the Razr flip phone, and they were just doing extremely, extremely well. And I had to figure out what would this deal be and how would we actually activate, and the challenge was to infuse mobile technology into the day-to-day operations of a venue. Great, I can pull from all these different disciplines that I know. And we did the early days of text messaging to screen, where you would be able to, in between the opening act and the headliner, to be able to share your thoughts up on the screen, and how do you moderate that? Sure. Do enter to win things. As we started to get more sophisticated with it, and I started to learn the technology more, in the clubs, you could go up to a piece of folk art, which was a Bluetooth hotspot, and download a ringtone. A ringtone, by the way, that was a guitar riff that I recorded in the office, because we didn't know any other way to do it. We were just trying this out. That's awesome.
We were first to sell a ticket via mobile technology. We're with a very complicated, and certainly I'm glad that it didn't continue to present day, but you could text message your way through a menu system to get to a show that you were interested in buying a ticket for, and if you had a linked credit card account on hob.com, you could then purchase your ticket right there on your device. Really cutting edge stuff at the time.
Sure.
And I became the mobile guy for the concert business, and was doing interviews and speaking at panels, and had never really thought my career in music and in the concert business would lead me into digital. Ultimately, House of Blues winds up getting acquired by Live Nation.
Yeah, I remember
again,
that. Yeah.
So this very first company that I left, that became Live Nation, wound up getting what I thought was my dream job at House of Blues. And I, after about a year of layoffs and getting a knock on my door every 2 months, somebody saying, "Work for me now. Hey, you work for me now." I exited and decided after a little bit of a break to build my own mobile app, which was a digital magazine on the iPad, which was just coming out.
Yep.
And fantastic project. Learned a ton. Burned way too much of my own money doing it.
Sure.
And then decided I needed to get a real job again. And that's where the Recording Academy opportunity presented itself, and I find myself there now.
So what's your kind of day-to-day at the Recording Academy? It's probably different throughout the year, but just kind of give us a quick kind of overview of what you do at the Recording Academy.
Yeah, I spent years, the first 5 years here in the marketing and partnerships team.
Okay.
Working with sponsors of the Academy and trying to leverage the general awareness that we have of the Grammy Awards, which is our big annual event that we're known for. Everybody knows the symbol of the Grammys,
Sure.
but they don't necessarily know the organization behind it. So as a marketer, it's how do we generate awareness for this? How do we make sure that people tune into the broadcast, that it's very it consistently stays in the top 3 or top 5 of television events globally for the year, and then how can we also find sponsors who we can leverage both their voice and their dollars to do interesting things and keep the Grammy brand itself fresh. And as with everything, digital became more and more of an important factor when having any conversations, internal or external, about how are we going to activate this? How are we going to reinvent this? How are we going to find new audiences? And I began to take over sections of our content team, and not take over the team, but take over the voice of some of our content. We called it marketing content, and in that, there's things that we can do just for promotional purposes only, and things that we can do that we find are more brand building and that it explains who we are. The Recording Academy is the organization behind the awards. The awards are what we're known for, but it's kind of a Trojan horse because it gets your foot in the door, and every artist, pretty much anybody who has a pop culture sensibility or is aware of entertainment on any level knows what our symbol is, what our statue is, and that it's the most coveted award in music. But it's coveted because the membership behind it, the creators, the producers, the engineers, the artists who all vote on the award, make it a peer granted recognition of excellence, and that means a lot. But that same group of membership also is interested in the philanthropic side of what we do.
Right.
And so we've got 2 charities: Music Cares, which is health and wellness for the creative community. We've got the Grammy Museum, which not only has a physical presence in Los Angeles with exhibits, but works tirelessly with music education on the high school level, trying to make sure that the next generation of kids in a world where we've got continue cuts in arts programs at the public school level. How can we step in there and help with curriculum, help with funding, give grants, recognize excellent school teachers? We also do a lot of work in preservation of music, and we just yesterday had the passing of Rick Hall from Fame Studios in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. I spent a weekend there where we interviewed him and every member of that town who might have stepped foot in the place to preserve the legacy of it and to understand how some of the greatest songs got created and who are the people behind it. And again, that's the thing that this continues to tie back with the awards, is that the recognition of the song or the album, the big splashy television event that happens once a year that gets 27 million viewers.
Wow.
This is our 60th year, and does very well. It is truly a team of creators, of writers, of engineers, of producers, of everybody that is behind those wins, those successes. Even just those nominees. If you're nominated, it changes your life,
sure,
regardless of whether or not you win. You're forever Grammy nominated, whatever your name is.
Sure.
And fighting for those folks, fighting for them on Capitol Hill, trying to make sure that copyright law is up to date with the realities of today's business. That's really what the Academy is about.
Interesting.
We just find ourselves every January and February focusing on producing a great television show, but the rest of the year we're focusing on the membership that we serve, and it keeps us very busy. A lot of people ask, great, what do you do the rest of the year? And the answer is, we do everything that we weren't able to do because we were focused on a TV show.
No, I think that's really great, man. And I love how you kind of give kind of an overview of kind of the other stuff that you guys kind of do throughout the year. But I really want to kind of move away from kind of, your day-to-day kind of job. And I really want to kind of get your thoughts on where the kind of entertainment industry is right now, because you have kind of everybody that says it's fine and it's always been this way and there's nothing really wrong. And then you have everybody or you have people on the other side where it's all doom and gloom and, it's going away. I'm curious to know, where do you kind of see the kind of entertainment from kind of maybe a music and from a, television and a movie side of things? Where do you see the state of it?
Yeah, and most recently, I've in the last year I've moved over to purely the digital media side of the Academy.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because of these larger trends that you mentioned that are happening to entertainment and to music specifically. How we reach an audience, how we continue to reach the new audiences and the audiences that are coming into adulthood is very important. We have 60 years of history here, and we can't just assume that 10, 20 years from now everybody will be tuning into traditional TV anymore. Sure. Just exactly the same way that the music industry was at the forefront, and now we're seeing it in other mediums, but the music industry was at the forefront of the shift to digital.
Yeah.
The physical product, in the case of music, the album, the full album, first of all.
Sure, yeah.
Now that we're in a singles world, the physical product that you went to a store and purchased, or you Columbia hats, or by mail order received a CD of. That is the shrinking part of the business. Saw for many years, last 10 years, really. The music business is over. The music business is fallen off of a cliff. It will never regain its footing. There are huge losses, and it's a death toll. Well, I don't agree with that. I think as we're starting to see, even in the numbers of some of the publicly traded companies, the record labels, and the services like Apple Music and Spotify,
sure,
that's not true. There is a healthy ecosystem still there. I truly believe, and I know this by seeing some of the data firsthand, that there is more music being consumed now than at any other time in our history.
Interesting. Is that because of
access to
streaming?
music. Yes, I mean I think
Okay.
access to music is the barriers are gone now.
Sure.
The barriers to access were created by a a business structure, a business uh, a series, a number of business entities that were delivering value by giving you product, but there was exclusivity in how you obtained that product. As those barriers started to come down, and as technology created that change, and rightly or wrongly, and by the way, there's a lot of people who are wronged in the process. Um,
Sure.
the general consumer out there has more access to it, so it's very healthy in that regard. Um, as we uh, as we start to think about, though, what was a $20 CD now is a free stream, or a
Sure.
stream that you pay $10 a month for, all access.
Yep.
You think about how that floats down the rest of the chain, and that singer, songwriter, that person who worked on the session, they're being compensated so we can continue to create it. The tools to create have leveled a playing field to a certain extent. It's easier to, just as it is for you to do a podcast
Sure.
or a radio program from just about anywhere now. You can record from just about anywhere now. The quality of which you do it, the craft with which you put into it, those are things that still take the 10,000 hours
Sure.
and still are something that ultimately will decide whether something rises to greatness or not. We're seeing it in the film business and television business too. That it's not just about the big three networks anymore. It's
Yep.
about the streaming services. It's about somebody who started as a bookseller who now sits at a center table at the Golden Globes awards. So this whole business um, um, continues all of entertainment and all of content, whether or not it's coming from a big entity or somebody down the street who just has a point of view. There is more out there. It's very healthy out there in terms of access to just about everything. Um, we find, I think, ourselves still challenged with some of the most basic things, which is how are you going to market it? How are you going to
Sure.
promote it? How are you going to break through? Because it's not just about buying a full page ad in the New York Times anymore. And that's truly the challenge today. Um, legal rights and copyright and clearance and all those sorts of challenges are a massive headache.
Sure.
But it's going to take some time to work those things out. Eventually, the consumer does win right now. Let's just make sure that we have a healthy ecosystem so that we can continue creating great stuff and not just, shaky cell phone videos
Sure.
of things happening on the street.
Sure. So I'm curious, though, to get your thoughts on, and correct me if I'm wrong, at least it seems like even with kind of online streaming, whether people are paying for it or not, in the movie space, like movies for them, a lot, or like a lot of movies are still doing really well. People are going to see the theaters. It seems like, at least in my opinion, that from the music side, yes, I might pay $10 a month for Spotify or Google Music or Apple Music or one of the other ones. But I discover new artists coming through my town, and then I'll go see them live in concert when they're, and maybe buy a T-shirt or a record, like an actual vinyl record nowadays. So, like, have you kind of noticed that, yeah, maybe they're not making money necessarily off of the actual, like, buying of a physical DVD or Blu-ray or CD, but they're actually going to a theater or a concert hall and maybe buying some merch around a movie or a show?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and this is well documented out there, that the share of the pie, of the revenue pie, has changed a lot in the last 10 years. Is, as you mentioned, it is much more on the live revenue side. It is on the merchandise side and the other parts of the business than it is on the recorded product. It used to be the other way around. A record label would actually pay for an artist to go out on tour in the 70s and 80s as a way of promoting album sales. Now record labels are signing what's known as 360 deals, which means we want to, if we're going to be responsible for or participate in getting you out there and getting you known and increasing your visibility, we'd like to have a piece of these other parts of the revenue stream. And it does change the idea of, do I need a full album? Should I just release 2 or 3 tracks on a consistent basis and just keep feeding folks on there out there, or should I focus on the traditional format and have a point of view or have something to say and have a cohesive whole? And there is no right or wrong answer to it. And what's interesting is that I think this new flexibility can fit the creative voice within any artist, and they have different paths that they can take now. But there still is something, and I'm a bit biased, but there is still something about a song as a recorded piece of as a recorded snapshot of that artist's point of view. Takes time to craft, takes time to sonically get it where you need, and it takes some expertise and some sweat to really make that song that everybody then wants to go see the ticket and wants to buy the T-shirt. And it always comes down to the song. I think in other formats, you see it in digital video, right? The guys that break through on YouTube because they have interesting storytelling or they have funny videos that they do, ultimately, if they break through and they get signed to some sort of a deal where they can monetize it and they can be given more resources to do a better job, a more polished presentation, with that, comes growing up a little bit as a creative, and you have to start thinking about other things. You have to start thinking about general appeal. You have to start thinking about or who your audience is and really serving that one niche. These are things that will stay true regardless of where the technology takes us. The business side is starting to catch up with the other side, and what's important, I think, whether it's a series streaming on Hulu, a YouTuber, a recording artist, whoever it is out there, that the audience doesn't take for granted that maybe the old school business is changing, but there still needs to be some commerce around the idea of giving somebody the freedom not to have to work the 9-to-5 day job and focus their energy entirely on creative output. And it's a rare gift, and I think business is created around those people, but let's still respect those people.
No, I 100% agree with you, Jim. So we're kind of coming to the end of the show. So but I do want to kind of cover. You've been kind of with the Media X Awards kind of since the beginning. How have you kind of worked with them kind of since the beginning, and what do you kind of see your role with them has kind of been over the last 10 years?
10 years ago, the first MEAs was the Mobile Excellence Awards.
Right.
And it's just exactly what we've been talking about here. I was the mobile guy working in music, or the music guy who knew a lot about mobile. And it was an interesting space, and we've seen a lot of folks come and go. We've seen a lot of great ideas win MEA awards. But as mobile stopped becoming mobile and started becoming just the internet, and as all of us who are part of the team that works with Sarah Miller and shapes the awards in terms of how it's going to be presented and at what categories we think are important. We've all seen that traffic to websites is 60-70% from mobile devices now. Sure. What's the difference between a mobile device and a laptop anymore? The computing power in your iPhone is light years ahead of the laptop that you had 10 years ago.
Yep.
So the MEAs are starting to recognize all forms of media. and the fact that media continues to evolve means that, and there's, it's easier in some regards to create media. It still comes down to presentation layer. It still comes down to how you simplify it, and what a user experience is, what the interface is like, and how can you create an atmosphere, an app, a technology to simplify the process of wading through all of this media that's out there, all of this entertainment product or news and information that's out there, and make it digestible and make it actually entertaining. And that hasn't changed over 10 years of the Media Excellence Awards. It's how the technology has evolved and how it's leveraged that is what gets awarded. And frankly, for those of us involved behind the curtain with Sarah on it, we really enjoy seeing the best of the best that's out there, seeing how people have come up with ingenious ways to entertain or inform folks, and it gives us ideas about how we should maybe up our game as all of our businesses become more digitally focused, and we're always looking for that next way to excite a consumer out there, excite a fan out there, and then give them whatever our business message may be. But we still have to get their attention, and I think that's what the MEAs recognize.
Perfect, man. Well, we're coming to the end, so how about let's close the show with maybe mentioning a couple places where people can find you guys online and, check out all the stuff you're kind of involved in.
Well, of course, for the Recording Academy, it's Grammy.com. We have our show, our awards process is coming up on January 28th on Sunday. We'll be in New York this year, and it's our 60th year. So that's go to Grammy.com and follow us on our social handles, most of which are at Recording Academy. To stay up to date there, you'll see a lot of my colleagues' work and my work in any of those digital efforts. The Mobile Excellence Awards are coming up as well, and those winners hopefully will get a shot in the arm with the stamp of approval and adoration from industry leaders who vote on it. And as for myself, once we take a little nap for a couple of days after the Grammys, I dive back into a podcast that we're in the process of launching, but also listening to podcasts like yours, so that I can continue to learn, and this old dog can figure out how to continue to look at the horizon and not just rest on our digital laurels.
Well, perfect, Jim. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show today, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you and seeing you at the Media Awards in a couple of weeks. And have a good rest of your day. Yeah,
really appreciate it. It was a great conversation, and I can't wait to listen to more of your show.
All right, thanks, man. We'll talk soon. Okay, bye.
All right.
Thanks for listening. Please visit the show's website at buildingthefutureshow.com. Also check us out on Facebook at Building the Future Show and follow us on Twitter at Building Show. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.